The Flames lose a tough one to the Canucks as they also lose their captain to injury as they continue their fight towards a playoff berth. Hey everyone, welcome into Hot Topics. This episode brought to you by ProStars Plumbing and Heating, Calgary's first choice when it comes to plumbing and heating. Rob Wong joined alongside by Postmedia Calgary Flames writers Wes Gilbertson and Danny Austin. And guys, a playoff style game last night. The Flames do grab 1 point in the shootout loss to Vancouver, but Danny, would have been nice to grab that extra point. What were your biggest takeaways from the game?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been more than nice. I think it would have really put the Canucks in a bad spot. Like, that's the reality. I mean, there are, 18 games left for the Flames, 17 left for the Canucks. A win would have put the Flames up 3 points with a game in hand. That's possibly 5, at which point, you have 17 games if you're the Canucks to pick up 6 more points in the Flames. That's tough. So with the Canucks playing the second game of on back-to-back nights, they'd lost to Montreal the night before. I really do think this was an opportunity for the Flames to put their foot down a little bit and make a statement. And the fact that they didn't do it. In fact, they gave up a third period lead. They were really disappointed in the way that they let the foot off the gas, and they should be. So now you're basically even. Yes, you have that extra game, but you have some very difficult games coming up, starting with Colorado. This is one that I feel like the Flames should have won. I'm not going to say had to win. That's taking it too far. There's lots of games left on the schedule, and the Flames are in a good spot. But missed opportunity, absolutely.
Yeah, missed opportunity for sure. And since Danny did a good job there of summarizing the game, I'll just share, I think, a couple big picture takeaways for me and probably reason for encouragement for Flames fans. The biggest one, and none of us are surprised, but what we saw last night was a Dustin Wolf who the spotlight was not too big for him. The pressure was not too big for him. I think his heart rate during the day probably peaked at about 55. Like we saw every sign that the rookie goaltender was up to this challenge. And, I think that's a positive. The other thing we saw, and I know we'll talk more in a minute about the injury to Mikael Backlund and what that could mean, but I thought we saw that the rest of Calgary's sort of go-to guys, their highest paid guys, their leadership guys were ready to lead their team kind of through this playoff push. Like Jonathan Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri were as good last night, arguably, as we've seen them at any point this season. Blake Coleman is probably going to be, if this is possible, limping with both legs today after some of those shot blocks. Mackenzie Weegar had 2 assists. Like, I could go down the list of key guys, and I thought they showed up last night. As Danny said, it's a missed opportunity for sure. It has the feel of one of those that if you miss by a point or two, you kind of look back and say, maybe that's the one that got away from us. But in terms of kind of looking forward to an 18-game stretch that's going to include more of these huge games, I do think there were some reasons for positive as well.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of playoff-style games the rest of the way, to say the least. So the Flames in a bit of a tough spot, as you mentioned, Wes, with Mikael Backlund leaving with an upper body injury in the first period as of this recording. We do not know his status moving forward here, but what would the potential impact of an injury be, and who would have to step up in his absence?
Yeah, it would be substantial. We know Mikael Backlund has been playing through an injury for a while, although I wonder if this is something new. I think Mikael Backlund's been able to persevere through the pain of whatever it's been for quite a stretch now, but I wonder if this is something different. It's very un-Mikael Backlund to leave a game of that magnitude. Now, where they miss him is he's their best shutdown center. And this is beyond being the captain, just on the ice. He's by far their best shutdown center. He's 7th in the NHL in faceoffs this year. Like they trust him to take all their big draws. That's going to put even more pressure on Nazem Kadri at the faceoff circle. He's on their first penalty kill unit. That's going to put more pressure on a guy like Kevin Rooney. And it just leaves a glaring hole in the lineup. We saw Connor Zary get the first shot at filling that. We found out this morning he has a date later today with the Department of Player Safety. Who knows if there's supplemental discipline coming. And so the sort of overarching issue here is we've talked lots on these episodes. Danny and I have written lots that center is an area of weakness for the Flames. There just isn't a lot of depth there. And so we always knew if you had an absence to one of your top centers, you'd be in tough, and that's what they're potentially facing now as we await word on whether this is a serious injury to Mikael Backlund or he might be available for Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to in any way seem like I'm disagreeing at all, so this is meant to be additive, what I'm about to say, not. But, I mean, the other thing with these Flames, if you are out of market and haven't paid that close attention, is, they really have relied on these 6 veteran leaders, Backlund being sort of number 1 at the top of that list, but along with Blake Coleman, Jonathan Huberdeau, Nazem Kadri, Mackenzie Weegar, and Rasmus Andersson. And it's always sort of felt like those are the 6 they can't lose. Like, this team, they win low-scoring, tight games. That's the way that they play, but the margins are so thin, and losing one of those guys might just kind of push the margins in the wrong direction. So it's very worrisome, and especially right now. I mean, if you haven't been watching, it's hard to describe how much of the load Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Huberdeau have been carrying offensively. So this team, whether it's Backlund, whether it's one of those other guys, this team just needs other people to step up. Outside of that leadership group, I don't really think you can complain about the way those 6 have played. But whether it's Backlund or those other guys, it just brings into stark focus the fact that it can't just be those 6. You need your Yegor Sharangovic's, you need your Connor Zari's only second year, but you need all of them to begin to contribute, because it's been a lot on those veterans, and especially since the Four Nations break, it's felt like it's been just all those guys in a lot of ways.
Lastly, as Danny mentioned before, West Flames still in that second wildcard spot. They've got the game in hand on Vancouver, who is tied with the Flames in points with 71. St. Louis and Utah has 69 points, but they had that extra game, of course, ahead of the Flames at this point. When you look at those teams that are chasing the Flames, who do you think poses the biggest threat?
Well, for me right now, it's the Vancouver Canucks. They've always been the most talented team on paper. I put it this way earlier in the week in a conversation I was having with somebody, that the Flames need a lot of things to continue to go right for them, and they need a lot of things to continue to go wrong for the Canucks, because that's what we've seen in that market all season is, one thing after another. They're the biggest threat to me because on paper, they're the best team. I can't count how many times last night, as Vancouver's captain returned from an injury of his own, I turned to Danny and said, gosh, is Quinn Hughes good? And that's completely accurate except for the gosh part. And so, this is a guy who has the ability to sort of single-handedly lead the Canucks to the playoffs. We saw a really good Elias Pettersson. I know people watching this in Vancouver are going to grumble, well, it's just one game. But, as I look at the biggest threats, and no disrespect to a Blues team that has a hot goalie in Jordan Binnington, no disrespect to a Utah team that I think has the opportunity to sort of ride the wave of excitement in their city, and no disrespect to the Flames and what they have going. But, if I had to put money down, I'm probably looking for the best players in the race, and I wonder if that's not Quinn Hughes and his buddies in Vancouver.
Yeah, I was going to try for misguided attempt to come up with a different team, but I do think it's Vancouver. I think Vancouver should have been better than this all year. We all know it's gone wrong in many, many different ways for them, but as Wes said, there were times just watching that power play where I was like, oh, I haven't seen anyone like Quinn Hughes all year. It's just he's so good. And it's obviously more than one player. But if they can find some stability, you'd sort of expect them to be able to ride it out a little bit. I will say that Utah, it's felt for a month and a half, every time I check the standings, they're 1 point closer. They're coming. They're not backing off. So my final point would just be it's been a couple years in Calgary since we've gone into mid-March feeling like, oh man, there's a lot to play for. This next month is going to be fun. If nothing else, even if they don't make it, I do think that this gives the fans something to rally around. Pretty dark times out there in the world right now, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So whether it's Vancouver, Calgary, St. Louis, or Utah, I'm just enjoying the ride a little bit right now.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride so far for Flames fans. Going to be a tough stretch coming up here, though. You got the Avalanche on Friday before a 4-game Eastern road trip beginning in Toronto on Monday. So it's going to be a crucial next week here for the Flames. As always, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. For Danny Austin, Wes Gilbertson, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.